Glory to Allah, who created in pairs all things that the earth produces, as well as their own humankind, and other things of which they have no knowledge. The word as watch in the verse is the plural form of zuj and means pairs or partners. That is why husband and wife are defined as zuj, zucha. As it is seen, this word defines the opposites among similar things and being partners. 3 examples are given about the creation in pairs mentioned in the verse. First example, pairs that grow from soil. The first thing that comes to mind in this category is femininity and masculinity in plants. We will not mention about it now, as we have discussed in another work. Second example, pairs that are created from their own selves. The first thing that comes to mind in this category is the creation of humans as males and females. Third example, pairs that are created from things that we do not know. So, what is meant with the expression, pairs that are created from things that we do not know? The people who lived during the revelation of the Qur'an were not aware of the most of creation in pairs in the universe. While femininity and masculinity is the equivalence of the concept of pair, the expression of the verse, other things of which they have no knowledge, has a wider meaning. Thus, at the present time, we see one of the meanings that the verse indicates. As research conducted on the structure of the atom has developed, it has become clear that the existent particles are not limited only to protons, neutrons, and electrons, and the atom has a more complex, delicate, and perfect nature than we think. Creation in pairs is also valid for the smallest particles of atoms. A proton has its pair, antiproton. An electron is coupled with a positron, and a neutron possesses an antineutron. The creation of matter in pairs is one of the most important discoveries of physics. Paul Dirac, a British scientist, was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1933 for his discovery in this field. The discovery of Dirac is known as parity, and thanks to this discovery, it has been presented that the matter has a pair called antimatter. Antimatter bears the opposite characteristics of matter. For example, contrary to matter, antimatter electrons are positive and protons are negative. This fact is expressed in a scientific source as follows. Every particle has its antiparticle of opposite charge. The uncertainty relation tells us that the existence and non-existence of pairs forms simultaneously everywhere and at all times. As we see, the expression of the Qur'an, "We created other things of which they have no knowledge," is so full of wisdom and so mysterious. As Badiüzzaman Sayyid Nursi said, "As time grows older, the Qur'an grows younger." That is, as science develops with the progress of time, many mysteries of the Qur'an are revealed. Virtually, the Qur'an grows younger. Let us see how many pairs of which we have no knowledge will be discovered, and science will prostrate before the Qur'an. He makes you in the wombs of your mothers, in stages, one after another, in 3 veils of darkness. Such is Allah, your Lord and Cherisher. To Him belongs all dominion. There is no God but He. Then how are ye turned away from your true center? The Qur'an points out to the 3 dark stages of the baby in the womb with this verse, and states that man is created in the womb with the 3-phased creation. The Arabic expression fi zulumatin silasin, which is translated into English as in 3 veils of darkness, indicates the 3 dark phases of the embryo during its development. The order of these phases is as follows. 1. The darkness of the anterior abdominal wall. 2. The darkness of the uterine wall. 3. The darkness of amniochorionic membrane. As it is seen, the modern biology of today has shown that the embryological development of babies takes place in 3 different dark phases as it is informed in the verse. The developments in the area of embryology have proved that these parts are made up of 3 segments. Moreover, in the verse, it is indicated that man comes into existence in 3 separate stages, which differentiate from one another. In fact, modern biology of today has shown that the embryological developments of the baby in the womb takes place in 3 different phases. This subject, which exists in all course books of embryology of the Faculty of Medicine, is among the rudiments. For example, this fact is explained as follows in the source called Basic Human Embryology, which is one of the basic reference books on embryology. Life in the uterus has 3 stages. 1. Pre-embryonic stage, first 2.5 weeks. 2. The embryonic stage, up to the end of the 8th week. And 3. The fetal stage, from the 8th week to birth. These stages include different development stages of the baby. The information which is about the development of the baby in the womb can only be acquired by observations made with modern technological equipment. However, as it is seen, attention has been drawn to this information miraculously in the verses of the Qur'an, just like many other scientific facts. It is a proof that the Qur'an is the word of Allah, since there is so much detailed and true information within the Qur'an, sent down at a time when humanity did not have any detailed information on the subject of medicine. The story of the people of the cave in the Qur'an refers to many scientific miracles. In this proof, we want to discuss one of these scientific miracles. The following is stated in the 11th verse of the Surah of Al-Kahf. Then we struck upon their ears, causing them to go in deep sleep for a great number of years in the cave. A very important scientific fact has been referred to in this verse of the Qur'an. It is as follows. The Arabic equivalent of struck upon in the verse is the verb darebe. In Arabic, this verb bears the metaphorical meaning of we have made them sleep. However, when the verb darebe is used with the ears, that is, when the phrase struck upon the ears is used. This bears the meaning of preventing the ears from hearing. After this explanation, let us pay attention to the verse again. Almighty Allah could have used the expression, "We have made them sleep," for the people of the cave. However, He did not say so. Instead, He said, "We struck upon their ears." Here the preference of the expression, "we struck upon their ears," instead of "we've made them sleep," indicates a very interesting scientific fact. According to the discoveries of scientists, the only organ of sense which is active during sleep is the ear. That is why we need the alarm of the clock for waking up. Other organs of sense are not active during sleep. Thus, the wisdom of using the expression, "We struck upon their ears," by Almighty Allah for the people of the cave, is an indication of closing the senses of hearing of these youngsters, and thus their staying asleep for many years without waking. So, with the particular emphasis on the expression, "we struck upon their ears," the scientific fact of the activeness of ears during sleep has been pointed out. As you see, every word of the Qur'an is filled with wisdom. Sometimes it opens a door to a great truth with a single word. And with its every word, it proves that it is the word of Allah. Think of a book that mentions about a fact that science was able to discover only 100 years ago, more than 1400 years ago. Think of a man that mentions about a fact that science was able to discover only recently, more than 1400 years ago. Could anyone doubt that this book is a divine book, and this person is an extraordinary person? The Quran mentions more than 1400 years ago that the universe was expanding. The following is stated in verse 47 of the chapter of Az-Zariyat. With the power and skill did we construct the firmament, for it is we who create the vastness of space. The Arabic phrase "Inna li-Musiyun" means we are expanding it. The word musiyun is derived from the verb el-saw, to expand. The letter lam, el, at the beginning of this word is used to emphasize the noun or the adjective it precedes, and it means a lot or very much. Accordingly, this phrase means we are expanding the universe a lot. After analyzing the verse of the Quran, informing us about the expansion of the universe, we will examine what science says about it. There was only one view that prevailed regarding the issue up to the beginning of the 20th century. This view stated that the universe had a static structure and that it has existed like that since the beginning of the universe. No scientist mentioned the expansion of the universe until the 20th century, let alone mentioning, no one even imagined it. At the beginning of the 20th century, Russian physicist Alexander Friedmann and Belgian cosmologist George Lemaitre calculated theoretically that the universe was moving continuously and expanding. This fact was proven through observation in 1929. While examining the sky through a giant telescope, the American astronomer Edwin Hubble discovered that stars and galaxies continuously moved away from one another. Stars and galaxies moved away not only from us, but also from one another. In the following years, it became certain through observations that the universe was expanding. A universe in which everything continuously moves away from one another means a universe that is continuously expanding. In order to understand the expansion of the universe better, we can think as follows. Suppose that the universe is the surface of an inflated balloon. The points on the phone move away from one another. Similarly, the objects in the universe move away from one another as the universe expands. When this scientific fact was not known by anyone, and when people thought that the sun was as small as an apple, the Qur'an mentioned this fact centuries ago, and it stated clearly that the universe was expanding. This clearly proves that the Qur'an is Allah's word. That a scientific fact, which was discovered only in the 20th century, existed in a book 14 centuries ago, and that this fact was informed by a person who could not read nor write, can be possible only through one of the following two ways. 1. A human being discovered this scientific fact on his own. 2. This fact was expressed by Allah, who created the universe and is expanding it. The book in which this fact is written is the book of Allah, and the person who conveyed this message is His messenger. There is no other alternative, and it is not possible to accept the second alternative, for it is not possible for an illiterate person living in a period 14 centuries ago, when there were no telescopes, to discover, on his own, a fact that could be discovered only through giant telescopes. Therefore, the greatest geniuses in the history of the world could not draw the model of the expanding universe despite their observations and scientific studies. They could not even imagine it. Then this information cannot be the word of an illiterate person who lived in the desert 14 centuries ago when there was no technology. The book that contains this information cannot have been written by him. Then there is only one alternative left: to accept the second option. That is, this information was given by Allah, who created the universe and is continuously expanding it, and who sent this miraculous information to people through His messenger, Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him. And the book that contains this information is His book. If someone said, he may have written in coincidentally, that is, the Qur'an is the word of a human, and this human being wrote this fact in his book without being aware of it, and mentioned the expansion of the universe, we would say, millions of books have been written since that century. If it had been possible for a human being to write this fact coincidentally in his books, the same fact would have occurred in some other books coincidentally. However, it is just the opposite. This fact was not mentioned in any of the books written by human beings, and even in the books of genius astronomers up until the 20th century. This fact was not thought about by anyone, and it was not written in any books. We cannot attribute the fact that this information was given by the Qur'an to coincidence. Therefore, it is impossible to say anything other than the Qur'an is the book of Allah. Only one alternative is possible. The Qur'an is the book of Allah. Before looking at the scientific miracle which will be discussed in this proof, we want to give some information about the Arabic language. With the help of this information, the scientific miracle to analyze will be understood better. The words in the Arabic language are divided into two categories in terms of gender. The words that are used for female beings are called mu'unes, feminine. The words that are used for male beings are called muzikur, masculine. In Arabic language, things are either mu'unes, feminine, or muzikur, masculine, whether they are animals, plants, objects, or verbs. So, in Arabic, verbs are also divided into two as female or male. When the doer of a sentence is male, the verb is conjugated as masculine, and when the doer of the sentence is female, the verb is conjugated as feminine. That is, there is coherence between the verb and doer in terms of gender. After this information, now let us pay attention to the verses 68 and 69 of the chapter of An-Nahl. And thy Lord taught the bee to build its cells in hills, on trees, and in men's habitations. Then to eat of all the produce of the earth, and find with skill the spacious paths of its Lord. There issues from within their bodies a drink of varying colors, wherein is healing for men. Verily, in this is a sign for those who give thought. In Arabic, the bee is written as nahl, in the same way both for male and female. This word has no feminine form. However, the Qur'an uses the feminine form of the verb when it gives information about the inspiration which is given to the bee and what the bee does. As we have mentioned before, verbs in the Arabic language are conjugated in different ways according to the gender. This is also valid in many other languages of the world. When what the bee does is narrated in the Qur'an, the verb is conjugated in the feminine form. It is as follows. 1. In the verse, in order to express the meaning make habitation, the word itahaz, which is used for the feminine, is preferred instead of itahazi, which is used for the masculine. 2. In order to express the meaning eat of all fruits, the word of khul, which is used for the feminine, is preferred instead of khuli, which is used for the masculine. 3. In order to express the meaning follow the ways of your Lord, the word of yuslik, which is used for the feminine, is preferred instead of yusluki, which is used for the masculine. 4. The pronoun there in the sentence, there comes forth from their bellies, is expressed with the word hu, which refers to the feminine, instead of the word ha, which refers to the masculine. So, the deeds which are mentioned by the Qur'an as making habitation, that is, building the honeycomb, eating of all fruits in order to collect the nectar, following the ways of Allah, which is inspired and giving the honey from bellies, are performed by the female bee. That is, the doer of all deeds here is the female bee. So what do scientists say about this news given 1400 years ago? Are all of these listed works performed by the female bee, really? Now, listen to the words of scientists on this subject and hear what they say. They say that all deeds that the Qur'an mentions are performed by worker bees, which are female bees. There is no connection with the deeds which are mentioned by the Qur'an and the male bees. The sole duty of male bees that have huge eyes and have a larger form than the female worker bees is to ensure reproduction with the young queen. Male bees that accomplish this task at the end of summer are thrown out of the honeycomb and die soon, as they are accustomed to living with the nursing of female bees. As you see, the news of the Qur'an and the fact science has found in this century is one and the same. This fact, which has been discovered by science recently, but which has been informed by the Qur'an 1400 years ago, is a miraculous news of the Qur'an. However, it was impossible for the people to know the division of labor in the honeycomb at the time of the revelation of the Qur'an. The people of that time did neither know what the worker bees were female, nor that the works of building the comb and producing honey were performed by female worker bees. However, the Qur'an informed this, and the news turned out to be true as it was informed. Is there other way than accepting the Qur'an is the book of Allah in the face of this great miracle of the Qur'an, which amazes people? The Qur'an is the book of the being, who inspires the bee and prepares the honey in its belly. He let the honey be prepared by the female bee, inspired it, and informed this in his book centuries ago. Yes, the Qur'an is the book of Allah and His eternal speech. We believe in it and accept it. He who has sent down water from the sky, with it have we produced divers pairs of plants, each separate from the others. Fruit of every kind He made in pairs, 2 and 2. These verses of the Qur'an state that plants are created in pairs, and indicates a great truth which was discovered only in the 20th century. It is as follows. The root of the words azwaj and zojini used in the verses is the word zoj. While the word of azwaj is the plural form of zoj, the word of zojini is the dual form of zoj, and zoj means spouse. We understand from these explanations that the Qur'an states through its verses that the plants are created in pairs, and there is masculinity and femininity in plants too. What do scientists say about this subject? Is there masculinity and femininity in plants really? Now let us see the words of scientists. As a result of the studies made on plants, it is understood that there is masculinity and femininity in plants as well, and with the help of these different organs, reproduction occurs in plants. There are male and female reproduction cells in flowering and seedy plants. These cells are produced by the male and female organs, both of which are in the middle of the flower. In the tumid part of the female organ, called ovary, there are small and round seed ovules, and within them there are female reproduction cells too. The male reproduction cells are hidden inside the pollens produced by the anther of the male organ. While pollens, which are very light, are carried from one flower to another through winds or various animals, some of them cling on the vertex of the female organ. Afterwards, this pollen grain moves downwards from the stylus and reaches the ovules of the ovaries through a tube. The male reproduction cell passes from this tube and unites with the female reproduction cell in the ovule. When male and female reproduction cells unite, ovules are formed, and then seeds are formed from them. Now, let us think of the following point. Biology was not a developed branch of science during the era of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The reproduction of plants and the role of the female and male elements in this field were not known. With the development of the science of biology and botany, the existence of male and female cells in seeding and flowering plants was understood. Botanists were able to discover the difference of gender in plants only 100 years ago. Then how did a person who did not know how to read or write manage to know that there was masculinity and femininity in plants at a time when people were not aware of botany or biology? This question can have only one answer. It is as follows. That person did not know in its own. He knew it because Allah, who creates pairs from plants, informed him of it. If this answer is not accepted, we will never be able to explain that person's informing of scientific facts and his news turning out to be true. No one's mind can accept that a person who did not know how to read or write was able to discover a fact 1400 years ago on his own and write it in a book, though the fact was discovered only 100 years ago by people who spent all of their lives studying biology and botany. A person who accepts this cannot be considered sane. There is only one answer that human minds can accept. The Qur'an is the book of Allah. Verse 22 of the chapter of Al-Hijr of the Qur'an gives us the following news 1400 years ago, when the importance and meaning of fecundating was not known. And we send the fecundating winds. Yes, this verse clearly states that winds have a fecundating property. What do scientists say about this news given by the Qur'an? Let us find out. Scientists state that winds have a fecundating property as follows. There are male and female elements in the flowers of all plants. Fruits occur when the male element fecundates the female. This fecundation takes place thanks to wind. Allah created the seeds of many plants so light as to fly in the presence of even a very light breeze. Pollens, dusts, and seeds of innumerable plant species are carried from one plant to another through winds. Thus, the plants reproduce through fecundation, and their generations are ensured to continue. That is, plants reproduce thanks to the fecundating property of winds. Apart from fecundating plants, winds also fecundate rain clouds to make rain fall down. Until recent times, It was thought that the only relationship between wind and rain was that winds dragged rain clouds. Yes, it was something that could be seen by anyone who watched the movement of the clouds. However, the relationship between wind and rain was not only this. Air bubbles called aerosols form on the surface of seas and other waters due to foaming. They mix with the dust that winds drag from the land and fly toward the upper layers of the atmosphere. These particles, raised by winds, combine with water vapor, and the water vapor condenses around these particles. If it were not for these particles, 100% water vapor could not form clouds. Clouds form when winds fecundate the free water vapor in the air with the particles they carry. After these explanations of science and scientists, let us analyze the issue and find answers to the following questions. 1. When was it discovered that winds had a fecundating property? Answer. It was discovered in the 20th century. 2. Is it possible for a person who could not read nor write to discover this fact 1400 years ago, that which was only discovered in the 20th century? Answer. It is impossible. Only an insane person can claim that it is possible. 3. How can it be explained that the fact that winds have the property of fecundating is mentioned in the Qur'an if it is not accepted that the Qur'an is the word of Allah? Answer. It cannot be explained in any way. If the Qur'an is not accepted to be the word of Allah, neither this information given by the Qur'an nor any of the other scientific facts can be explained. There are two ways. To accept that a human being who could not read or write knew and discovered 14 centuries ago on his own that winds have the property of fecundating and all of the other scientific facts stated by the Qur'an. Or to say, the Qur'an is the book of Allah. All of the news within it is the word of Allah. There is no other possibility. No sane person can accept the first probability, for it is impossible for a human being to know and discover them on his own. Then there is nothing else to do but to accept the second possibility. This book is the book of Allah, who is Alam al-Ghuyub, the knower of all unseen and unknown things. Yes, this book belongs to the same person who created winds and gave them the duty of fecundating. Everything within this book belongs to him. We believe in and accept it. And we have made the heavens as a canopy well guarded. Yet do they turn away from the signs which these things point to. In the verse above, the Qur'an states that the whole sky is a well-guarded canopy. What does well-guarded canopy mean? Let us hear what scientists say about this. The atmosphere is an ocean of gas surrounding the world, consisting of invisible gases, nearly 10,000 kilometers thick and harder than stone. Now, let us list the protective properties of the atmosphere. Millions of meteors, some small and some big, fall on the Earth from space every day. Despite its transparent structure, our atmosphere encounters this meteor bombardment like a steel barrier. If the atmosphere did not have this property, there would be no life in the world. The Earth would be full of holes. When astronauts went to the Moon, the satellite of the Earth, they saw that meteors that had come down like shower had hit the Moon, and the bigger ones had formed deep holes on the surface of the Moon. When the meteors hit the molecules in the atmosphere very fast, they acquire very high temperatures, evaporate, are transformed into dust, and disappear. The atmosphere also filters the harmful rays coming from the sun. It inhibits the ultraviolet lights that have deadly effects on living beings. If the atmosphere did not have an ozone layer, the harmful rays from the sun would not be filtered, and life in the world would disappear. This protection is indicated in the verse with the phrase, "well-guarded canopy," and it is stated that this is a sign and evidence for the existence of Allah. The average temperature in space is approximately -270 degrees. Our world is protected from this freezing cold of space thanks to the atmosphere. The atmosphere prevents the energy coming from the sun from returning to space very fast thanks to these properties it has. Also, it makes the rays of the sun disperse, enabling the places that do not see the sun and that are in the shade to be bright. The atmosphere enables the heat on the Earth to be distributed in a balanced way based on the air movements that occur within it. Thus, the air masses in the places where it becomes very hot are carried to the places where it is not hot, establishing a balance. So, excessive rising in the temperature in the places around the equator that constantly get hot is prevented. Similarly, excessive fall in the temperature in the places near the poles that constantly lose heat is prevented. In short, all of the events, from being protected from the deadly cold of space to maintaining the livable heat in the world, have been possible thanks to the creation of the atmosphere perfectly, with all the details by Allah. It is not only the atmosphere that protects the world from harmful things. Along with the atmosphere, there is also a layer called Van Allen belts, originating from the magnetic fields of the world and serving as a protective shield against the harmful rays coming towards our planet. If there were no Van Allen belts, it would be impossible to live in the world. The cosmic rays coming from the stars apart from the sun cannot pass through this protective shield. These plasma clouds can be 100 billion times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Along with heat and light, radiation and winds containing protons and electrons come to the world from the sun with a speed of 1.5 billion kilometers per second. However, the winds coming from the sun cannot pass through the Van Allen belts, which form magnetic rings 40,000 miles away from the world. we keep living without being harmed by those dangers that threaten our lives. However, we should not forget that everything, from the layers of the atmosphere to Van Allen belts, is an appointed official of Allah. The real powerful being is Allah. What protects us from the dangers mentioned above is Allah, not those belts or other things. They serve as a veil for the power and magnificence of Allah. They are simply causes. It is necessary to see what is explained above in this light. Allah, who made the sky a protective canopy, mentioned this fact in His book 1400 years ago through the following verse: "And we have made the heavens as a canopy, well guarded." Yes, this verse is one of the evidences showing that the Qur'an is the word of Allah, and that it cannot be the word of a human being. For a scientific fact that has recently been discovered as a result of astronomical and scientific studies cannot have been the discovery of a human being who lived 1400 years ago, when there was no technology and no astronomy, and who could not read or write. A person who believes in it and claims it cannot be a sane person. Like this scientific miracle, all of the miracles of the Quran draw attention to one single fact. The Quran is the word of Allah. In verse 41 of the chapter of Al-Ankabut, the following is stated: "The parable of those who take protectors other than Allah is that of the spider who builds to itself a house. But truly the flimsiest of houses is the spider's house, if they but knew." There are two important points in this verse. The first one is as follows. The word of Ankabut in the verse is referred to the female spider. The word of itahazet is the feminine conjugation of the verb that means build for itself. The masculine conjugation of this verb is itahaz. Allah Almighty states that the house of the spider is made by the female spider by using the feminine conjugation of the verb. Here, this indication of femininity expressed by the Quran on this issue exposes another miracle. It is as follows. As a result of the researches on animals, very interesting results on spiders have been reached. One of them is that the house of the spider is made not by the male spider, but the female spider. The result that the science has reached is in complete harmony with the news of the Quran. The Qur'an states that the house of the spider is made by the female spider, and science approves this and accepts that it is true. The second important point in the verse is as follows. Another piece of information on spiders that has been acquired is as follows. In a large section of animals, males are bigger and stronger than females. Spiders are among the minority of the living creatures in which females are bigger than males. Generally, living species build their houses in order to protect themselves from heat, cold, enemies, and any kind of harm. However, the spider builds its house in order to destroy, harm, and eat those who visit its house by mistake. Thus, the house of the spider is the most insecure of all houses. The female spider also eats its male after copulating with it. Thus, the house of female spiders is insecure for its male, let alone others. If the male spider cannot be among the successful males who can escape after copulation, the house of its female will become his grave. With the flimsiness of the house of the spider, the Qur'an intends to express this figurative meaning. So, the Qur'an reveals another miracle by stating both that the house of the spider is built by its female and that the flimsiest house of all is the house of the spider. The Qur'an mentions many issues from the expansion of space to the atmosphere of the earth being a protective roof, from the waves under the seas to the seas not mixing with one another, from the orbits of stars to the house of the spider being built by the female and the flimsiness of this house. The Qur'an never makes any mistakes in any fields, though it gives information about such different issues. On the contrary, it exhibits miracles that amaze people whose eyes and hearts are not blinded in all fields. It is impossible for an illiterate man who lived 14 centuries ago to know and mention all of these things on his own. Then the Qur'an can only be the book of the being that created the universe. For the Qur'an miraculously mentions everything that the book of the universe includes, and all of its news turns out to be true. The story of the people of the cave in the verse of the Qur'an refers to many scientific facts. We discussed some part of these scientific facts in our other videos. In this video, we are going to examine the indication of this story from the importance of moving in sleep. The following is stated in the 18th verse of the chapter of Al-Kahf in the Qur'an. Thou wouldst have deemed them awake, whilst they were asleep, and we turned them on their right and their left sides. This verse of the Qur'an mentions about the people of the cave, who remained asleep for about 3 centuries, and it is also stated that Almighty Allah moved their bodies on their right and left sides. What is the importance of the expression, moving them on right and left? Why is this detail mentioned in the verse? Surely there must be an importance of this expression, since it is included in the Qur'an, as there is no unimportant thing within it. So, what wisdom does turning on right and left sides in sleep have? The wisdom of turning on the right and left sides was only discovered in recent times. People who remain lying down in the same position for a long period of time encounter serious health problems, such as circulation difficulty, sores, and blood clotting in the part of the body in contact with the surface on which they lie. The bed sores which occur as a result of lying down in the same position for a long period of time are called pressure sores. For when a person lies down in the same position for a long time, the constant pressure on one part of the body may cause the compression and occlusion of blood vessels. Consequently, the oxygen and other nutrients carried by the blood fail to reach the skin, and the skin begins to die. This results in the occurrence of sores on the body. Unless these sores are treated, layers of the skin, fat and muscle tissues may also die. They may even lead to a life-threatening situation. Thus, changing the position of the body for every 15 minutes is the healthiest thing to do in order to reduce this pressure. That is why patients with paralysis receive special care and are moved every 2 hours with the help of other people. It is obvious that the expression of the verse, "We turn them on their right and their left sides," will be better understood after the explanations of scientists. Yes, this expression indicates a scientific fact, which can only be discovered in our age. So, the Qur'an is such a book that there are many purposes in every word of it, and many wisdoms in every verse. Any scientist can find many issues belonging to his field from the Qur'an and take lessons from it. Doubtlessly, a book which contains summaries of all sciences cannot be the word of a person who does not know how to read or write and who lived 1400 years ago. This book can only be the word of a being who created all realms and whose knowledge encompasses everything. Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the apostle and messenger of that being. Iron is one of the elements highlighted within the Qur'an. There is even a chapter named Al-Hadid, which means iron. The following is stated in verse 25 of the chapter of Al-Hadid. And we also sent down iron, in which there lies great force, and which has many uses for mankind. The word anzalna, used for the formation of iron in the verse, means we sent down. However, what we know is that the iron is dug out from the underground. In our opinion, we dug out should have been preferred instead of we sent down. However, the situation is not what we think. With the expression we sent down in the verse, a very important scientific miracle is pointed out. It is as follows. For the formation of the mineral of iron, a certain temperature is needed. This necessary temperature exists neither in the earth nor in the sun. The sun has a surface temperature of 6,000 degrees Celsius and a core temperature of approximately 15 million degrees. However, this temperature is inadequate for the formation of iron. Iron can only be produced in stars much larger than the Sun, where the temperature reaches a few 100 million degrees. When the amount of iron exceeds a certain level in stars, called a nova or a supernova, the star can no longer accommodate it, and it eventually explodes. These explosions make it possible for iron to be dispersed into space. All astronomic discoveries have put forth that the mineral of iron comes from huge stars from outer space. Not only the iron in the Earth, but also the iron in our solar system is acquired from outer space. For, as we have stated before, the temperature of the Sun is not enough for the formation of the iron mineral. What is understood from all above is that the mineral of iron is not formed in the Earth, but sent down by being carried away from supernovas. Just as it is stated in the universe, just as it is stated in the verse, it is not possible for this knowledge to be known in the age when the Qur'an was revealed, that is, 1400 years ago. Since it is not possible, how can it be explained that this information exists within the Qur'an? Is there any explanation other than the fact that the Qur'an is the book of Allah? Besides, it has been mentioned in the verse that the iron has many benefits for humans. However, people used iron only to make swords at the time when this verse was revealed, and were not aware of the other benefits of iron. Despite this, the Qur'an stated, "It has many benefits for mankind." Now, let us see the latest scientific data on iron. Without the iron atom, carbon-based life in the cosmos would not be possible. That is, there would be no supernovae, no heating of the primitive Earth, no atmosphere, and no hydrosphere. There would be no protective magnetic field, no Van Allen radiation belts, no ozone layer, no metal to make hemoglobin in human blood, no metal to tame the reactivity of oxygen, and no oxidative metabolism. It is very significant and wise that attention is attracted to iron, particularly that the following is stated about it. Iron in which there lies great force, and which has many uses for mankind. Along with what we have mentioned above, there is one more secret in this verse. It is as follows. The verse that mentions iron is verse 25 of the chapter of Al-Hadid. This verse contains two rather interesting mathematical codes. Al-Hadid is the 57th chapter within the Qur'an. When the word is uttered with the definite article al, the, as Al-Hadid in Arabic, the sum of the abjad value, numerological value, of its letters is also 57. The numerological value of the word hadid alone, without the definite article, is 26, and 26 is the atomic number for iron. That is, when we utter it as Al-Hadid, its numerological value is 57, which is the number of the chapter within the Qur'an. When we utter it as Hadid, its numerological value is 26, which is the atomic number of iron. Now, let us think justly. Is it possible for a human being who could not read or write, and who lived in the desert 1400 years ago, when science and technology did not exist, even by name, to know that iron was sent down from the sky, and to write it in a book by paying attention to numerological values? Can any sane person accept this? Can a person who accepts it be regarded as sane? In that case, it is nonsense and illusional equal to closing one's eyes to the sun, which illuminates the world, to say that the Qur'an is the word of a human being. A person who closes his eyes is able to turn day into night only for himself. We send endless praise and thanks to our Lord, who does not leave us in darkness, and who turns the night into day with the light of the Qur'an. The Qur'an draws attention to a very important geological function of mountains. We have set on the earth mountains standing firm, lest it should shake with them. If we pay close attention to the verse, we will see that mountains' property of preventing shocks on earth is mentioned. This fact, which was unknown by anyone during the period when the Qur'an was revealed, has been exposed as a result of the discoveries of modern geology today. In the past, it was thought that mountains were merely protrusions rising above the surface of the earth. However, scientists noticed that this was not actually the case, and that those parts known as the mountain root sometimes extended down as far as 10 to 15 times their own height. With these features, mountains play a similar role to a nail or peg firmly holding down a tent. For example, Mount Everest, the summit of which stands approximately 9 kilometers above the surface of the earth, has a root deeper than 125 kilometers. Besides, mountains come into existence as a result of the movements and collisions of massive plates forming the Earth's crust. When two plates collide, the stronger one slides under the other. The one on the top rises by bending down and forms the mountains. The layer beneath proceeds under the ground and makes a deep extension downward. Consequently, as stated before, mountains have a portion stretching downwards as large as their visible parts on the earth. Professor Ciavita, a world-renowned underwater geologist, made the following comments in reference to the way that mountains have root-like stalks attaching them to the surface. The fundamental difference between continental mountains and the oceanic mountains lies in its material. However, the common denominator on both is that they have roots to support the mountains. In the case of continental mountains, light low-density material is extended down into the earth as a root. In the case of oceanic mountains, there is light material which supports the mountain as a root. According to the law of Archimedes, the function of the root is to support the mountains. The effect of mountains on general stabilization of the Earth's crust is defined as isostasy. This concept is explained as follows in Webster's New 20th Century Dictionary. Isostasy is the general equilibrium in the Earth's crust, maintained by a yielding flow of rock material beneath the surface under gravitational stress. Furthermore, a book titled Earth by Dr. Frank Press, former president of the United States National Academy of Sciences, which is still used as a textbook in a great many universities, states that mountains are like stakes and are buried deep under the surface of the earth. In some verses of the Qur'an, this role of the mountains is pointed out by a comparison with pegs. Have we not made the earth as a wide expanse, and the mountains as pegs? He set on the earth mountains, standing firm, lest it should shake with you. Now, we are asking those who close their eyes and minds to the sun of the Qur'an, and who still say that the Qur'an is the word of a human. How could you explain the Qur'an's explicit declaration of a scientific fact at a time when there was no science and technology, while this has just been discovered as a result of modern geological and seismic researches? Would you believe in Allah, who makes mountains as pegs for the earth, by saying that this is His book, or still close your eyes to this sun and condemn yourself to darkness? The following is stated in the 14th verse of the chapter of Al-Mu'minun. Then we made the sperm into a clot of congealed blood. Then of that clot we made a photous lump. With this verse, the Quran points to some stages of man in the mother's womb. The first stage mentioned in the verse is the stage in which the drop, that is, the nutfa, turns into clinging clot, that is, the alaka. The second stage is the stage in which the clinging clot, that is, the alaka, turns into a lump of chewed meat. In this proof, we want to analyze the stage of turning into a lump of chewed meat, which is mentioned in the verse. Indeed, the embryo in the womb is in the appearance of a lump of chewed meat, both because of its smallness and unformed bones. Besides, it is interesting that the embryo has a shape as if it has tooth marks on it during a certain period while in the womb. That is why the expression of the Quran, a lump of chewed meat, is a miraculous statement, which is absolutely correct. The expression, a lump of chewed meat, is mentioned in the 5th verse of the chapter of Al-Hajj as a morsel of flesh, partly formed and partly unformed. Indeed, at this stage the embryo is perceptibly visible, but so inappreciable in shape it is impossible to comprehend its details, and thus it is in complete compliance with the Quran's expression, a morsel of flesh, partly formed and partly unformed. It is very suitable to use the expression, a morsel of flesh, partly formed and partly unformed, for the stage in which some single body parts of man become perceptible, but some other parts not such perceptible as head, body, or internal organs. Professor Dr. Keith L. Moore says the following about the stage which is mentioned as a lump of chewed meat in the Quran. We learned what the aforementioned verses mean in astonishment when we examined the embryo of this stage. For there becomes a string of beads appearance on the embryo on and around the 28th day, and they identically look like tooth marks in appearance. We made a plastic model of the embryo of this stage and marked with our teeth marks by chewing it. The generated model extremely looked like the embryo of the stage of which we were examining, and that explained very well why the Qur'an describes the human embryo as a lump of chewed meat. Now, let us analyze the result that stems from this proof and find the following answer. How can we explain the fact that the Qur'an stated 1400 years ago that the human embryo would resemble a lump of chewed meat in a phase in the mother's womb, which was discovered in the last century with the advancement of medicine? There are only two possibilities. Either the Qur'an is the book of Allah, who created man and transformed him into the shape of a lump of chewed meat in the mother's womb. Or Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, who could not read or write, discovered this fact on his own and wrote it in his book. God forbid. It is not possible for any sane person to accept the second alternative. Therefore, the Qur'an is the pre-eternal word of Allah, as the miraculous verses that astonish man express, and Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger. Thou seest the mountains, and thinkest them firmly fixed, but they shall pass away as the clouds pass away. With this verse, the Qur'an informs us that mountains are not motionless as they seem, but are in constant motion. What does the movement of mountains, like clouds, mean? What do scientists say about this fact informed by the Qur'an 1400 years ago? Now, let us see what science says about it. For the first time in history, a German scientist called Alfred Wegener proposed that the continents of the Earth had been attached together when it first formed, but then drifted in different directions, and thus separated as they moved away from each other. However, geologists understood that Wegener was right only 50 years after his death, that is, in the 1980s. As Wegener pointed out in an article published in 1915, the land masses on the Earth were joined together about 500 million years ago. And this large mass, called Pangaea, was located in the South Pole. These continents, which emerged after the split of Pangaea, have been constantly moving on the Earth's surface at a rate of several centimeters per year, and in the meantime changing the sea-to-land ratios of the Earth. This movement of the Earth's crust, which was discovered at the beginning of the 20th century as a result of the geological researches, is explained as follows in Science Resources. The Earth's surface, which consists of the crust and upper mantle, is made up of parts called plates. There are 6 large plates and numerous small plates forming the surface of the Earth. According to this theory, called plate tectonics, these plates move on the Earth by drifting the continents and the ocean floor. It is calculated that the continental movement is 1 to 5 centimeters per year. As the plates move like this, changes happen in the geography of the world. For instance, the Atlantic Ocean expands every year. An important point to mention here is this. In the verse, Allah uses the word tamuru, drifting to describe the movement of the mountains. It is interesting that the term used by scientists today is continental drift. The word used by the Qur'an and the term scientists use is the same. Both the Qur'an and scientists use the word drifting for this movement. Now, let us analyze this scientific miracle. The movement of the continents is a fact that could not have been observed at the time when the Qur'an was sent down. It is impossible for a human being to have this knowledge on his own at that time. This fact was discovered as late as the beginning of the 20th century. Therefore, Allah used the phrase, "You see the mountains and think them firmly fixed," in the verse, and stated beforehand how people would evaluate the issue. However, he explained a fact after that and stated that mountains were drifted just like clouds were drifted. That is, he attracted attention to the movement of mountains and the fact that the continents moved along with mountains. As it is seen, attention is attracted to the motion of the plate on which mountains are located. It is a great miracle that this fact, which has been discovered by science recently, is mentioned in the Qur'an, and this also proves clearly that the Qur'an is the word of Allah, and the person who informs us about it is the messenger of Allah. Those who reject it have to explain how Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, obtained this knowledge 1400 years ago. When we observe the universe through the naked eye, we think there is a non-unmoving universe. The immense activities in the universe started to be noticed only after the invention of the telescope. In a very long period of history, people thought the world was not moving and that the sun rotated around the world. Then, in the process that started with Copernic, Kepler, and Galileo, they discovered that the Earth rotated around the Sun, which remained fixed. This discovery, which is regarded as a revolution, was very important, but it had not yet been discovered that the Sun moved on its own orbit. Then, thanks to the advanced telescopes and the development of science, it was understood that the world rotated around the Sun, which also moved. The Sun moved at a speed faster than 720,000 kilometers per hour, with the planets around it toward the star Vega, on an orbit called the solar apex. This fact, which was discovered only in the last century, was stated by the Qur'an 1400 years ago. And the Sun runs his course for a period determined for him. That is the decree of Him, the exalted in might, the all-knowing. It is not permitted to the sun to catch up the moon, nor can the night outstrip the day. Each just swims along in its own orbit, according to law. It is He who created the night and the day, and the sun and the moon. All the celestial bodies swim along each in its rounded course. As we can see it, the Qur'an stated 1400 years ago that the sun and the stars moved, This proves that the Qur'an is the word of Allah. The Qur'an attracts attention to another scientific discovery about the movements of the sun through another verse. The following is stated in verse 5 of the chapter of As-Safat. The Lord of the heavens and the earth, and what is between them, and Lord of the Easts. It is understood from the phrase, the Lord of the Easts, that the sun had more than one rising point. It attracts attention to the fact that the East, which we know as the rising place of the sun, needs to be thought as places, that is, more than one East. Yes, the sun rises every morning and sets every evening. However, these risings and settings take place in a different part of the universe each time. That is, the stars and the planets that float in the sea of the sky do not pass from the same route again. They move on their orbits. The sun, which rises in a place, sets in another place at the same time, since the world is round. The night follows the day, and the day follows the night. Then the rising places of the sun, not the rising place, is in question. The morning time is different for every point of the globe. Every place waits for the sun to rise at a different hour, minute, and second. We watch the sunrise from different places of space. The sun is the same sun, the world is the same world, but the place in space is different. Now, let us ask some questions about these two miracles of the Qur'an. 1. Can the fact that the sun and the stars moved, something stated by the Qur'an 1400 years ago, was approved by scientists, be interpreted as anything but as the Qur'an is the word of Allah, who created the skies, determined routes there, and made the sun and stars move on that route? 2. Is it possible for a person who lived 1400 years ago and who could not read nor write to discover a fact that was rejected by many scientists who lived before the last century, and that was discovered only in the last century, which was a century of science and technology? Why should Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, make these claims and risk his credibility by opposing the people of that century in a period when almost all of the knowledge about the sky was wrong and superstitious, and when people did not have anything like that on the agenda? All of these questions can only be answered by the fact that the Qur'an is the book of Allah. If it is accepted that the Qur'an is the word of a human being, hundreds of questions will arise. In that case, no scientific fact stated by the Qur'an can be explained. The only answer to this question that can persuade the heart and the mind is as follows. The Qur'an is the pre-eternal book of Allah and His address to humanity. Hazrat Muhammad, peace be upon him, is Allah's messenger and beloved slave. We believe in it. In the 37th Surah of Ar-Rahman, our Lord states the following: When the sky is rent asunder and becomes a crimson rose like melted oil. The word ed-diham in the verse is used for two meanings. The first one is hot oil and the other is satiyan, a kind of tanned and dyed leather. After this explanation, let us translate the verse again. If the sky is rent asunder, you shall see it like dyed leather, or a crimson rose, which seems like hot oil. Many interpreters of the Qur'an interpreted this verse as the situation of the sky at the moment of apocalypse, because the renting asunder of the sky reminded them of the doomsday. However, while we can understand the notion of renting asunder of the sky as going to space by passing over the atmosphere, we can also understand that as renting asunder the sky by eyes via telescopes and watching beyond. So from this aspect, the meaning of the verse is as follows. If you could afford to go to space by renting asunder the sky, or manage to cleave it with the equipments that you invent and watch its beyond, you will see a saffron in the color of a rose or hot oil. Then what does a crimson rose like melted oil mean? If you wish, let us see the explanations of scientists and space researchers. Nebula is the name given to nebular structures which are composed of gases, dust, hydrogen, helium, and other ionized gases that exist in space and spread in wide areas. These eruptions of gases are very large and very fast. Afterwards, these gases come closer and form a cloud of gas. The temperature of this cloud of gas is more than 15,000 degrees centigrade. In fact, as a result of space researchers of nowadays, scientists have come across with a nebula which is in the color of a crimson rose, looking like melted oil, just as it is described in the verse. Yes, this nebula was named as Rosette Nebula, which means a cloud of gas that resembles the shape of a rose, by scientists because it just looks like a rose. Rosette Nebula is a vast mass of dust and gas away from the Earth approximately 5,200 light-years and has a diameter of about 130 light-years. How can it be explained that something that has just been revealed, thanks to today's technological equipment of observation, was informed by a person who did not know how to read and write, in an age when there was no science or technology? Yes, is it possible for a person who lived at that age and who did not know how to read and write to give such news? Definitely not. Then the Qur'an is the pre-eternal word of Allah, and the person, peace be upon him, who brought this news to us is his messenger. We believed in it. See they not that we gradually reduce the land in their control from its outlying borders? See they not that we gradually reduce the land in their control from its outlying borders? These two verses of the Qur'an mention that the surface of earth has been reduced and diminished from its outlying borders. Has the surface of earth been reducing from its outlying borders, really? What can be the meaning of this reducing? What do scientists say about this subject? According to the information of NASA, while the Earth's equatorial radius is 6,378.5 kilometers, its polar radius is 6,357. This means a difference of 0.3%. Here, there is an indication of this flattening at poles with the following statements from the Qur'an. We reduce the land from its outlying borders, and we diminish the land from its outlying borders. Besides, we also point out to the following issue that there is a statement in the verse as we gradually reduce instead of we reduced. From this statement, we understand that the process of reducing still continues. If there were a statement within the verse as we reduced, we could understand that the earth was created in the same shape as it is today. The statement, we gradually reduce, informs us about a formation after a definite process. That is, reducing is still continuing. The following 2 points which stem from this verse of the Qur'an are in complete conformity with the discoveries of the creation of earth. 1. There is a reducing at the edges of the earth. In fact, the earth is flattened at poles and bulges at the equator. This reducing still continues as it is stated in the verses. 2. The present earth is different than its first state. There has been a gradual flattening from its edges in the course of time after a process. This occurs as a result of the rotation of the earth around its own axis. The conclusion that stems from the verses of the Qur'an of which we have analyzed is in complete coherence with the scientific discoveries. There is a reference for other scientific truths in the verses apart from these findings. One of them is that there is a loss of matter around the earth, though very little, as a result of Earth's rotation around its own axis. The statements in the verses as we reduce and we diminish indicate this loss of matter around the earth. Scientists confirmed this indication of the Qur'an and approved that there is a constant loss of matter around the earth, though very little. Here, these verses are also related to the decrease of land from another aspect. The scientists of Goddard Space Science Institute of Manhattan discovered that the level of water had been increasing as a result of the melting of ice sheets at the poles. The increased level of water also covers more land. As the coasts are covered with water, the total surface area, or the quantity of land, also diminishes. Therefore, the statements of the verses as we reduce and we diminish also indicate the coasts being covered with water and the reducing of land on the earth. Now, let us think about this matter. It was not possible for the people who lived in the age of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to know these scientific truths that are informed in these verses. You can even see that you cannot receive any answer from the people who are not really interested in physics when you ask them subjects such as whether a matter is flattened from its poles when it turns around its axis or not, or about the diminishing of land on the earth, the flattening of the poles, and the loss of matter on earth. This information is hardly known by any people except those who have a special interest in physics or the formation of Earth nowadays. So, how can you explain that this information exists in the Qur'an, which was revealed 14 centuries ago? If we attribute this book to an illiterate person, then what will we say about the scientific discoveries of this book? Did this person discover these scientific facts, which have recently been discovered in our age, on his own, 14 centuries ago? Then, is there any other option than the Qur'an is the word of Allah? No way. The discovery of the Qur'an's scientific miracles in our age is an aid and support of Allah to believers against the increased attacks on religion. Today, the secrets of space and earth have been revealed, much more so. Both the art of Allah and the Qur'an's miraculous declarations are understood much better. Yes, the Qur'an reads the universe for those who know how to listen. I swear by the firmament which returns. The following is stated in the 11th verse of the Surah of At-Tariq. I swear by the firmament which returns. In this verse, Allah Almighty swears by the sky and draws attention to its function, sending back and returning. What does the returning function of the sky mean? If you wish, let us learn what this expression means from scientists. As is known, the atmosphere surrounding the Earth consists of many layers. Each layer has many important duties for the benefit of living beings on Earth. When the atmosphere is analyzed, it has been discovered that each layer has the function of sending the materials or rays they are exposed to back into space or back down to the Earth. Now let us examine the returning function of the layers of atmosphere with some examples. For example, the troposphere, 13 to 15 kilometers above the Earth, enables water vapor to rise from the surface of the Earth to be condensed and turned back as rain. The ozone layer, the lower layer of stratosphere at an altitude of 25 kilometers, reflects harmful radiation and ultraviolet light coming from space and sends them back into space. The ionosphere reflects radio waves broadcast from the Earth back down to different parts of the world, just like a satellite, making wireless communication, radio, and television broadcasting possible over long distances. The magnetosphere layer sends the harmful radioactive particles emitted by the Sun and other stars back into space before they reach the Earth. Now, let us ask the following questions. What does the statement of the Qur'an that was revealed 1400 years ago concerning the functions of sky layers which have been discovered in the recent past mean? Could this be explained by anything other than the fact that the Qur'an is the word of Allah? The returning back function of sky has recently been discovered. It is impossible for a sane person to accept that a human being, especially an illiterate individual who lived 1400 years ago, to have this knowledge. If the Qur'an is not accepted as the word of Allah, it is necessary for us to accept that a person who lived 1400 years ago observed the sky with electrotelescopes and acquired this knowledge. Someone who accepts this could not be regarded as sane and a human. People used to have serious contradictions about the shape of the Earth for centuries, and most of them claimed that the Earth was flat, just like a tray. The roundness of the Earth has been verified as a result of logical and mathematical explanations over the last centuries. After the development of technology, it was also visually proven that the Earth was round when men went to space and the Moon. In fact, the Qur'an referred to this fact miraculously centuries ago. He created the heavens and the earth in true proportions. He wraps the night up in the day and wraps the day up in the night. The Arabic word which is translated as to wrap in the verse is kewara. This word comes from the same root as the word kura, sphere, which also exists in the Turkish language. In Arabic, this verb is commonly used in order to express the action of wrapping turban around the head, as well as wrapping an object around an aspheric thing. This verb, which is used for wrapping a turban around an aspheric thing, like the head, is also used in order to express wrapping the night up in the day. In the verse, while it is expressed that the night is wrapped up in the day, it is also expressed that the day is wrapped up in the night. The reason for the formation of day and night is the aspheric structure of the earth. The aforementioned action of this verse can only be actualized if and only if the earth has a spherical structure. Another verse which refers to the spherical structure of the earth is as follows: "And after that he spread the earth." In this verse, the word which is translated as spread is deha. The word deha comes from the root of dahu, which means to spread. Although the word dahu means to spread or to set out, this is not a prosaic action in terms of its meaning. This word is used to describe actions for setting out and adjusting spherically. The meaning of roundness is also present in other words derived from dahu. For example, the word dahu is also used to describe children dropping a ball into a hole in the ground, games involving throwing stones into holes, and games played with walnuts. Words derived from that root are also used for an ostrich to make a nest, to clean stones from the place where it is about to lie down, for the place where it lays its eggs, and the egg itself. Indeed, the shape of the earth is rounded in a way that resembles an egg. The flattened spherical shape of the earth is described as geoid. In this regard, the use of the word deha in the verse contains important information about the earth given by Allah. It is understood from these explanations that the Qur'an informs us about the roundness of the earth. However, it does not explicitly describe it, but only indicates it so that centuries that could not understand the roundness of the earth would not suspect about the news of the Qur'an and oppose it. Is it possible for a human being who does not know how to read or write to discover the roundness of the earth on his own 1400 years ago? Definitely not. Then this news cannot be the word of a human being. This news can only be the word of Allah, who created the earth and gave the aspheric shape to it. We believe in it. He has let free the two bodies of flowing water, meeting together. Between them is a barrier, which they do not transgress. The expression of the verse has a mind-blowing style. For the verse informs us that the seas do not mingle with one another, despite all storms and huge waves. Yes, Science confirms the verses of the Qur'an as it always has been and proves that it is the word of Allah. It is as follows. The French marine scientist, Captain Jacques Cousteau, who is famous for underwater research, explains the results of his investigations about water barriers as follows. We were investigating of some researchers' judgments that put forth that there were some barriers that separated different masses of the seas from each other. As a result of various studies, we saw that the Mediterranean Sea has a peculiar natural level of salinity and density. At the same time, it has specific life forms. Then we analyzed the mass of water in the Atlantic Ocean and saw that it was completely different than the Mediterranean Sea. However, these two seas, which merge at the Strait of Gibraltar, were supposed to be equal or at least near to equal in terms of salinity, density, and life forms that they had. However, these two seas have different structures even in places where they converge closely. Upon our investigations, we came across an event that amazed us. There was a great water curtain at the merging point that did not allow these two seas to mix. The same kind of water barrier was found by German scientists at Bab al-Mandab, where waters of Gulf of Aden and Red Sea converged in 1962. In our later investigations, we witnessed the existence of the same kind of barrier in all merging points of seas that have different characteristics. This amazing fact, which amazed Captain Cousteau, about the waters that do not mix up though seas converge, is explained with the following verse in the Qur'an 14 centuries ago. He has let free the two bodies of flowing water, meeting together. Between them is a barrier which they do not transgress. Another kind of water barrier on Earth is seen at bays and deltas, where the freshwater rivers flow into the seas. Rivers that have the utmost possibility of mixing into one another because of their surface and bottom currents never mix with salty water in places where they fall into seas. If Allah did not put the law of not mixing up between these two waters, the freshwater rivers on Earth would mix up with the salty seawater, and the living creatures within them and their environments would be annihilated altogether. The Quran attracts attention to the miracle of this not mixing of these fresh and salty waters in another verse as follows. It is He who has let free the two bodies of flowing water, one palatable and sweet, and the other salt and bitter. Yet has He made a barrier between them, a partition that is forbidden to be passed. Yes, the fact that the seas do not mix with each other and the freshwater rivers do not mix with salty waters shows the infinite power of Allah. Its being expressed 1400 years ago in the Quran proves that the Quran is the word of Allah. For it is impossible to base this information on a man's personal discovery who lived at that age. It is also impossible to base it on all people's discovery who lived at that age. It is impossible for a man to discover and write a truth that science has discovered only in this age, on his own 14 centuries ago. Therefore, the Quran cannot be the word of man. It is the pre-eternal word of Allah, who is the creator of lands and skies. The issue of how the universe came into being has always been one of the issues that scientists wondered about and discussed most. Many theories were put forward regarding the issue throughout history. Each theory was refuted in the course of time as science advanced, and they were labeled as wrong. The theory that is agreed on and is widely accepted today is the Big Bang theory. The Big Bang is a cosmological model claiming that the universe came into being 13.7 billion years ago from an excessively intense and hot point. It was first put forward in 1920 by Russian cosmologist and mathematician Alexander Friedmann and Belgian physicist Georges Lemaitre. This theory, which assumes that the universe had a beginning, has widely been accepted by scientists, especially by physicists, because it is supported by various evidence. According to the Big Bang model, the universe was in a very intense and hot state in its first phase before expansion. That is, the universe was all in one piece. Then it was separated into pieces to take its current shape with a big explosion called the Big Bang. This knowledge, which scientists were able to obtain only within the 19th century, was informed by the Qur'an 1400 years ago. The following is stated in verse 30 of the chapter of Al-Anbiya. Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit of creation? Before we clove them asunder, we made from water every living thing. Will they not then believe? The word translated as joined together in the verse is the Arabic word ratk. It means fused, coherent, inseparable. That is, this word is used in order to describe two substances that form a whole in Arabic. The verb fatk, used in the verse, means to separate. In Arabic, this verb is used in the sense of splitting something that is adjacent and coming out by breaking something. For instance, this verb is used when a seed sprouts and comes out of the ground in Arabic. Now, let us go back to the verse. In the verse, a situation in which two things are joined together, ratk, is mentioned. Then they are separated, fatk. That is, one of them comes out by tearing the other one. When we think of the first moment of the Big Bang, we see that the whole matter of the universe was together in one substance. In other words, everything, even the skies and the earth that had not been created yet, was within the same substance, interbeaded, ratk, and inseparable. That is, they were joined together as it is stated in the verse. Then this substance broke into pieces through a big explosion. That is, the deed that the Qur'an defines as fatk took place. The Qur'an informs us about the Big Bang theory, which was discovered in the last century, more than 1,400 years ago. Anyone who thinks impartially and justly will accept this. A human being who could not read or write could not have discovered this fact 1,400 years ago. Can a human being have discovered a fact on his own 1,400 years ago that scientists discovered only 100 years ago? Since it is impossible, there is only one alternative left. The book that mentions this fact is the Book of Allah, who collected the whole realms in one substance, and who created the earth, the sky, and everything within them, through a big bang after that. Yes, the Qur'an is the pre-eternal book of that being. We believe in it. Now, we will make you listen to a sound. What does this sound remind you of? Yes, it sounds like someone knocking at the door. The human ear cannot hear all sounds of the universe. It only hears the frequency range of human speech that covers 250 Hz and 3000 Hz. It cannot hear the sounds below this frequency, which are called infrasounds, and sounds of ultrasonic, which are above this and at a very high frequency. They can only be recorded with equipment that can perceive these high frequencies. With the development of science and technology, the ultrasonic sounds of the universe from the atmosphere to the planets of the solar system, which sound at a very high frequency, have been recorded. The most interesting among them is the star which is named as Pulsar by the scientists, mentioned as the star of Tariq in the Qur'an, and sworn by. Yes, this star, which is called Tariq, sounds just like the sound of the door being knocked by someone. The most interesting side of this is that the word of Tariq in Arabic language means the knocker on the door. In fact, the word Tariq stems from the root of the verb tark. Tark means knocking strongly, slamming audibly. According to this, Tariq basically means the one who beats strongly, just like beating with a knocker and knocking on the door. How could today's discovery of the sound of the star, which is in the form of door knocking of named as Tariq, meaning door knocker, 1400 years ago, be explained, since there was no science or technology then? If we regard the Qur'an as human word, God forbid, we must also accept that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, recorded these ultrasonic sounds with the equipments that perceive high frequencies 1400 years ago, and called them Tariq, but there is no single human being on earth who could accept this idea. The miraculous news of the Qur'an about the formation of underground waters. The verses of the Qur'an about the falling of rain and the place of water in our lives gives us true information. If we were to live in another period of history, we would not be able to understand this information. Since the cyclic process of waters in the world has been exposed in detail nowadays, we can easily understand the information about waters in the verses of the Qur'an. When we compare the old information about waters and the related verses of the Qur'an, we see that the Qur'an presents the truest information about waters just like any other subject, without including the wrong information of the old ages. However, does this information, which is well known for us, can be known in any other ages of history so clearly? Let us see the views of the philosophers who are considered to be the most important philosophers and geniuses in the history about the cyclic process of water before showing the scientific information and the trueness of the verses of the Qur'an. Thales of Miletus explains the reason of the existence of underground waters as follows. The waters of the ocean that gushed out in the air by the pressure exerted by winds blowing from the depths of continents fell back down, penetrating the earth. That is, according to the Thales of Miletus, underground waters occur as a result of the overflowing of oceans due to winds. Plato shared this view and believed that its return to the ocean was caused by a huge whirlpool. Aristotle contended that the vapor that rose from the earth condensed in the cool recesses of mountains, forming subterranean lakes and spring waters that were fed by these lakes. Yes, these views that made you laugh belonged to philosophers who were the most intelligent people of their ages. The first significant discovery of water's perpetual cycle and the formation of underground waters was by Bernard Palissy in 1580. According to him, underground waters were formed by the penetration of rainwater into the earth. R. Rimanieris, who is the author of the article of Water Information of Encyclopaedia Universalis, gives the following information. The concepts of purely philosophical character about the natural phenomena related to waters had to wait until the Renaissance in order to yield their places to impartial observations. However, the Qur'an gives the information that underground waters form as a result of the penetration of rainwater into the earth ages ago, in a time when there were no science or techniques. Seest thou not that Allah sends down rain from the sky and leads it through springs in the earth? The information of the Qur'an about the formation of the underground waters as a result of the penetration of rainwater into the earth, clearly stated 14 centuries ago, was put forth in Europe in the 16th century, and only at that time they were able to oppose Aristotle. If the Qur'an is not accepted as the book of Allah after this information, how can the trueness of this news of the Qur'an be explained? How was this ecological information, which could not be discovered by so many intelligent philosophers, discovered by an illiterate person 14 centuries ago? Attributing this information to the discovery of an illiterate person who lived at that age could only be possible by insanity. Then the Qur'an is the word of Allah, who brings the water from skies and lets it be absorbed by the underground springs, and informs us about this miraculous news 1400 years ago. Before we start dealing with the issue of the scientific miracle of the Qur'an, we want to ask you a question. Do you have any information about the weight of clouds? If you do not have any information, we want you to make a guess about the weight of clouds. What do you think the weight of clouds is? Or, let us simplify our question. Do you think clouds are heavy or light? you will probably answer this question as light. However, the Qur'an stated 1400 years ago that clouds were not light at all, but on the contrary, they were very heavy. Now, let us have a look at the meanings of some verses regarding this issue. It is He who sendeth the winds like heralds of glad tidings going before His mercy. When they have carried the heavy laden clouds, we drive them to a land that is dead. Make rain to descend thereon, and produce every kind of harvest therewith. It is He who doth show you the lightning by way both of fear and of hope. It is He who doth raise up the clouds, heavy with fertilizing rain. As you see, the Qur'an stated 1400 years ago that clouds were not light at all, and described them as heavy clouds. What do scientists say regarding this issue? Are clouds really as heavy as the Qur'an states? According to the research made in recent years, quite astonishing figures about the weight of clouds have been found. For example, a cumulonimbus cloud, known as the thunder cloud, can contain up to 300 tons of water. Yes, you did not misread it. We are mentioning clouds as heavy as 300 tons. The fact that a mass of 300 tons is caused to stand in the sky without any support is something that astonishes the mind. It is more interesting that this information is mentioned in the Qur'an. The weight of the precipitation that covers an area of 50 kilometers square at a height of 1 centimeter is about half a ton. Now, let us think of this. At the time when the Qur'an was revealed, it was impossible for people to have this information about the weight of clouds. Furthermore, we probably thought that clouds were very light before we learned this fact. However, clouds weigh hundreds of thousands of tons, and this fact is included in the Qur'an. How can it be doubted that the Qur'an is the word of Allah after hearing this information? If it is doubted, how can the information given by the Qur'an be explained? It cannot be explained in any way. There is only one explanation of the fact that the weight of clouds is mentioned in the Qur'an. The Qur'an is the book of the being who stores thousands of tons of water in clouds. This being sends clouds to dry areas through winds and gives life to those areas. Yes, the being who created clouds and makes clouds float in the air with thousands of tons of water also sent down the Qur'an. We believe in Him.